So James asks, the August 21st, 2017 solar eclipse seems likely to have a significant effect on the USA and on the dark state. Do you have any comment on this? Anything we should know or do in advance of this date?
Well, because we're releasing this straight on the eclipse. Today is the day we release is 21st or 22nd, and you will know when it comes out. We are obviously recording it well ahead of time. There is nothing you can do ahead in advance of this date because we're already on it. But don't worry about it. If there was anything that I thought you needed to do in advance, I would have found a way to post and warn you in advance. So the fact that it's not done in advance, you're safe, you're fine. So here's the deal with eclipses in general. Eclipses are very important. They are usually turning points in the zodiac when humanity and Earth, from the astrological standpoint, every human gets touched, and humanity and Earth, they get to look at something more closely, abandon something that didn't work, or start something new. So things, every eclipse has this like multiple effect, and it usually works for a minimum of 6 months. Sometimes it actually starts working a month ahead, 1 month ahead. And go back in time to 1 month ahead. What did I do? On the 21st of July, I released my webinar 3, The Future of Money, right? The Future of Money was and continues being a very successful webinar. A lot of people wrote me very laudatory reviews. You can see some of them. A few of the first ones I posted on the actual webinar 3 page if you haven't gotten a chance. So the effect of the eclipse, and I'm talking this specific eclipse, already started a month prior, right? And it happens all the time like this. So for those of you who subscribe to my webinars, not eclipses, obviously, my webinars, you already started experiencing the eclipse. You already got knowledge 1 month ago that you were supposed to have for this eclipse. And usually the effect of the eclipse continues for another 6 months. So next month, we might have something else again. And I intend, in the end of September, I intend to do a free Q&A webinar. Only live section is free. We will actually make this announcement in the end, full announcement. So all of you, my dear friends and participants, so all of you know what to expect. Only the live webinar is free. Once we have recorded it, afterwards, people will have to pay money for the recorded Q&A webinar. So keep that in mind. But all of you are invited to participate free in the live webinar. So then it continues for the next 6 months. That's what usually happens. But this eclipse is very potent and very special. It is called the Great American Eclipse because it is only fully visible in the USA and actually throughout the USA, and it's not visible anywhere else in the world. This is very rare. Usually you see eclipses throughout the world and usually in more than one place. So here we basically, in the US, we have a monopoly on this eclipse sort of. And that's why they call it the Great American Eclipse. Now, some people went as far as comparing it to the end of 19th century eclipse that supposedly set the stage for the rise of the US, for the rise of the inventions in the US, for the rise of Hollywood, for the rise of cars, like car industry and many stock market and many other things, supposedly, okay? And if we assume that happened during that late 19th century eclipse, all I can tell you, my friends, is then we are about to accelerate the decline of the US because nothing is forever. Everything comes to an end. So I will tell you this, that as I predicted many times before, and I'm continue telling you this, throughout period 8, the rest of period 8, the decline of the US will be basically almost unnoticeable to most. Either it will be shrouded, it will be hidden from the masses, so masses don't perceive it as such. But in period 9, it accelerates. Or it will be a slow decline for the foreseeable future. But I do guarantee that in period 9, it will accelerate and it will get a lot worse. What you just saw happened in Charlottesville, I believe Charlottesville, right? It's Virginia, all these clashes, and don't tell me about false flag. I don't even want to hear about false flag. I don't care if it's false flag or not. This is a typical period date occurrence. Terrorism, extremism, all these clashes, divided society, 50-50. It is also typical for the great earth shift that we're experiencing. It's typical for both. Basically, the great earth shift and period date go hand in hand here. But also what is happening here is that, well, the eclipse, we're already living out these eclipses. The first eclipse occurred on the 7th of August, and that was a full moon lunar eclipse. That's the time of endings usually. Strangely enough, during that time on the 7th and up until the 12th, I started experiencing very strange breakages of anything to do with Mercury retrograde, because on the 12th we also had Mercury retrograde start, but the effect of Mercury retrograde starts several days before. It's called the bookend date. The bookend date of Mercury retrograde, that's several days before the beginning and also several days after the end of Mercury retrograde. During those several days, actually Mercury retrograde effects could be more vicious. They could be actually even more pronounced than during the rest of Mercury retrograde, when you're inside of it. And so both of our cars suddenly broke down for no reason whatsoever. It was very strange. My computer started having strange glitches, but because this is old computer and I already have new computer lined up, I just haven't transitioned yet. Well, that's understandable. So it's the time of endings, that first eclipse we had on the 7th. Whatever didn't work is starting to end. Then our modem, and those of you who read my Futurist Trendcast latest article, you saw how my modem actually prevented me from publishing an article in time and all that. But miraculously, we conjured another modem suddenly, which we didn't even know we had, and suddenly we found it in the stash, and thank God it worked. So we were back on track pretty quickly. These are the things that happen suddenly. Things started malfunctioning, and that's normal for Mercury retrograde, for things that are mechanical with moving parts and electronics, as well as anything that has to do with transportation and communication, to suddenly malfunction. Well, we're back on track. Everything else is working really great. And as you see, we're recording pretty well. Everything sounds great. The webinar is on schedule, on track. All my consultations and reports, everything else is on track. So we are back in the picture, back in in the cyber world. And what we have here, so endings, right? So the world is telling me, oh, it's already time for you to ditch your old computer. Enough is enough. And I love my old computer, so I'm very slow to relinquish it. Same with the car. It's time to change it for the new car. And I've been thinking about that for a year now, but again, very slow with the execution because I don't do that great in 3D. Whatever is 3D, I try not to change things too much because it's just like too much trouble for me, to go out shopping and etc. And so that's where we are. We're approaching, very importantly, the new moon solar eclipse. And solar eclipse, unlike the full moon lunar eclipse, is about the new beginnings, generally speaking. But this specific eclipse is at 28 and a half, almost 29 degrees of Leo. And Leo, first of all, is a very important sign. It's one of the ancient signs. It's the sign of basically showing off. You could say that Leo rules Hollywood and MSM, things where people have to be flamboyant. Actually, I have a pretty serious connection with Leo myself. Leo also corresponds with number 8. And that's very interesting from that perspective. Leo and number 8 go hand in hand. And so Leo and 29 degrees, almost 29 degrees, that's a very interesting degree. And once you get into those late degrees, 30 degrees is the end of the sign. So 28 point something is almost near the end of the sign. So while it is the solar eclipse, and it's a very nice, friendly eclipse, in fact, it does not have harsh energy to it. But once you get to those late degrees, do you know what is happening? That talks about endings as well. So even though this is an eclipse of beginnings, it also has the energy of endings. And Leo being one of the most ancient signs, probably the most ancient of the zodiacal signs, it also talks about past, something past, okay? And Leo has nothing to do with the US, incidentally. That's another thing. While it is called the Great American Eclipse, Leo and the US, well, Leo has some association to the US through its rising sign. I firmly believe that, because there is no consensus here, that the rising sign of the US is actually Aries, another fire sign. Leo, Aries, and Sagittarius are 3 fire signs. But from that perspective, yes, there is some association with Leo, but not direct association, because it's not the rising sign of the US. It's not maybe there are some planets there, but we don't know enough about that, okay? And Cancer is the ruling sign of the US. The rising sign, which is even more important than a ruling sign oftentimes, my personal firm belief is Aries, although some people disagree and say it's Gemini. So again, it's not Leo, okay? So basically what we have here is that it only touches the US so much, but it does touch the US, and it will continue touching the US, ready for this, for the next 40 to 60 years. It is not a direct correlation, but through Aries, another fire sign, and through the fact that it's only visible in the US, that means that next 40 to 60 years, there will be slow or fast, depending on whether there will be a revolution and civil war in the US in the period 9, which it can be. Okay, it's like a 50-50 chance at this point, and I will have more predictions for period 9 closer to period 9. So then I will tell you everything about what to expect in the US. And so depending on that, there could be slow or very fast changes, but my prediction is for the most part slow changes, very tedious changes, very unpleasant. It's like you are watching in slow motion, like the glue going down the wall. Like it's like very tedious, very unpleasant. Like, what is happening with my country? My country is going down the drain and I'm helpless. I can't really do anything about it. Period 9 is very, very bad for the US, because remember, in the cycle of elements, fire burns metal, it destroys metal, it melts metal. How do you melt metal? You know, in those big plants where you melt it and this like humongous with fire, and then it becomes liquid, it becomes water. In fact, it stops being metal. So fire is the death of metal. Anything to do with the West will experience very difficult times during period 9. Anything to do with the South will be on the rise, will be in the spotlight during period 9. And remember, we discussed it previously. A spotlight does not mean it's going to be a walk in the park. Look at Russia right now. The spotlight is on Russia, yet look at how many challenges, difficulties, how many deterrents Russia keeps experiencing. But despite that, every decision Russia makes, internationally and domestically, practically every decision that is made by Putin and by Russia is the right one. It's working out, just like it did. Whatever decisions US made in the period 7 were all the right ones. And now, whatever decisions US makes in this period, they're all the wrong ones. Look at what's happening. Whatever Obama did, whatever Bush did, and whatever Trump does is all wrong. Did you notice that? This is so interesting, right? And that's because of my system of periods and cycles. This is how it works. Okay, when your energy is with you, supports you, or at least does not impede you, at least it's neutral to you, you are okay or you're great. But when the energy is against you, watch out. That's why we say, like Eastern saying is, go with the flow. Don't go against the energy, because it's not going to happen. You know, it's interesting actually that most of my life I lived by some kind of sea or ocean. Very close to sea or ocean or just on it. And period 8 started. And as soon as period 8 started, we started moving into the mountains. Remember period 8? Mountain Earth. We started moving into the mountains. We all of a sudden wanted to be in the mountains. I'm already tired of the mountains. So very soon we'll be relocating for the period 9, where there is sun, where there's south and all that. And about that, we'll talk some other time. This is actually, in fact, all very interesting. I have to mention Trump for this episode. It is very important, and he actually is a lot more influenced by this eclipse than USA in general. But by extension, of course, USA is influenced by this eclipse via Trump. And here's what it is. This is so interesting, in fact. I looked up his birthday, and it's June 14th, 1946, age 71. Wow, he's old. He's pretty old. And when I looked up that birthday, because when I look at Trump without even knowing when he was born, my immediate thought is he's a Leo. Do you know why I say that? Can you guess why I say that?
No.
Us? No? Okay. Well, I know you don't do astrology, but I do. Astrology is one of my hobbies, as some of you might know, and I do not professionally usually do astrological stuff, but if people ask me, I can answer a lot of questions, macro astrology and your personal micro astrology as well. So if I know, I will always give you astrological information during consultations. So here's why. Look at Donald Trump's face, like roundish, like very, anybody who has Leo in them, whether it's overt Leo, like they were born as a Leo, or some covert Leo. Like, for example, for me, number 8 is important. It's like roundish, like pretty full face. Look at his hair. His hair is practically orange, like the sun. And his face looks like orange, practically orange. As I said, I also have some Leo influence because number 8 is important for me, both in Eastern numerology and in Western numerology, incidentally. And the Northeast is very important for me too. Because of that, I also have Leo-esque appearance, okay? So my hair is very different. It stands out somehow. Just if you look at my pictures, you notice in some pictures like hair stands out. But you practically see only later pictures, so you don't really know. When I was very young, every single person complimented me on my hair and how beautiful it is, how luscious it is, how do I effortlessly, without ever styling my hair, manage to have such a mane of hair, like lion's mane, right? How do I manage to have such a mane of hair? Actually, you're seeing my picture right now with one of the mane-like hairdos that I used to have when I was younger. And of course, the face that is like smiley, that is pretty memorable. You actually don't forget that face. It's like a sun, okay? That's his appearance. And he's very flamboyant too. Usually people have more or less sunny, or if not sunny, then flamboyant disposition. Very, like, oftentimes when it's like bad side of Leo, then it's very a disposition that is perhaps too much, like too in your face, like Donald Trump actually possesses. And this, incidentally, is not so much when one is born as Leo, okay? Then is something else. It's like more of a family man, and you may not even have the look of Leo. This is more of ascendant. So when I saw that he, in fact, was Gemini, June 14th, the Gemini, and then I looked up in professional astrological sites, and sure enough, he in fact is, because his time of birth is known. You have to know your time of birth in order to determine one's ascendant. And his time of birth is actually documented publicly. He is ascendant Leo. Ascendant Leo, that is a very, very important. That's what gives him that experience. In fact, ascendant is when the sun is rising, where in what sector of the zodiac the sun is rising at your moment of birth. And for him, it was Leo. So it gives him that spectacular, I don't know what degree of Leo, because that's also important. Because if he's early degrees of Leo, then it's one thing. Then this eclipse doesn't touch him as much because it's very late degree of Leo. This eclipse touches me quite a bit because all my astrological indications are for late signs, okay? Well, he was born late in Gemini, so he does display the characteristics. That's also very interesting because if you're born in late degrees of any sign, plus your ascendant and possibly your moon sign is also late degrees, which in my specific case, all three are, Okay, in your case, as at least 2 are late degrees of birth sign, etc. In that case, what happens is that I heard it from one very wise woman who counsels star seeds, that's definitely a star seed and basically characteristic of what I call cosmic soul. In other words, you're not earthbound soul. You come in during late degrees specifically as an indication that you are not of the earth. So he might be actually one of those. I will discuss it some other time if we decide to talk about Donald Trump. He is actually very interesting. I've determined what kind of soul he is, what his soul level, etc. Incidentally, in webinar 1, we calibrated him and his wife, and I don't remember if we mentioned what soul level they were. I believe we did, in fact, mention his soul level and his wife's soul level, and that's actually also very interesting to figure out whether these people can affect change, whether they can do something, whether they came in for something that is in fact going to change the situation for the better or worse. Sometimes it's worse, in fact. And yes, Donald Trump came in to shake up the status quo. He is here for that in this specific role. How successful he will be semi-successful. I already told you that because he is in a straitjacket. However, the fact that he is Leo ascendant is very important because this eclipse, even if he is not late degrees of Leo, touches him very directly. And because this is new moon solar eclipse, so it helps him actually. He might actually get some help. If anything, he will get a delay with impeachment, so he will survive for another 2-3 years, as I was predicting. About 2 years by now, for sure. Impeachment problems will continue and all these attacks on him will continue and he will continue caving in. But this eclipse might support him and also might give some more impetus for him to find new staff. Maybe he will be able to find some new people to work with him who will help him actually. The sun is helpful. It could help him. Also, as far as being in the sun, as far as being out there, Leo is actually very helpful with that. He actually has to guard against overdoing being like flamboyant and being out there and being so outspoken. He really needs to kind of tone it down and become a little more introspective, which he is not doing. He's too much, a little too much in so many ways. And he scares off a lot of people, especially people who were on the fence or who distrusted him to begin with from his past history. He scares them off. But that's the story of Trump. We'll be watching Trump. We'll continue watching him. He's still a dark horse in many ways. Again, my prediction was that he cannot be elected by any means for the next term, and not because of his age. Like my interviewer, Paul at the Plain Truth, he said, oh, that's reasonable. He's too old for that. No, that's not because he's too old for that. There were successful and still are very successful, very out there leaders that could be much older than him. Remember Berlusconi of Italy? He was still running to be reelected after he was 80 or 85. But he looked less than 70. He looked like he was in his 60s. He was that good. He obviously also has Leo in his chart. Leo also gives you that sunny disposition and also makes you younger. In fact, makes you younger than you really are in your physical age. Anyway, so this is what we have with Donald Trump. It's all super interesting about the eclipse. And as far as preparing, no, you don't need to do anything to prepare. Remember, the theme of this specific webinar, yes, prepare for your future, plan for your future, but go with the flow. The flow now says, eclipse in Leo. We have this ongoing changes, ongoing great earth shift for many, many years to come. It's enough for some of us, our lifetimes. And until the West changes and relinquishes this extra control that it usurped and it should not have, this extra power that should not belong with the West, and is holding on to it for dear life, it has to relinquish it until US, UK, and generally the West relinquish that of their free will. We will continue having the great earth shift. And the Great Balancer will continue working on rebalancing. And guess what? China is getting closer and closer to Russia. The more of this goes on in the West, the closer China will get to Russia. There's already a talk of a military alliance, formal military alliance between Russia and China. And Russia has been balking at it all this time. Russians had military alliances such as Warsaw Pact, and they were very, very disappointed in that. And so they don't want to enter into formal alliances, only informal organizations such as SCO or the BRICS or even Eurasian Union. They're building very, very cautiously. They don't want to give away the farm again. They already did that in the past. Okay? So one more time to wrap up this episode, we have USA and the West that have to relinquish power. We have specifically Russia. This is the time of Russia. And this is the time of Russia because this 20-year period is so great for Russia, but it goes way beyond that. Way, way, way beyond that. Period 9 will not be bad for Russia. It's not like swell and terrific, but period 8 will be waning at that time. Just like think of period 7 right now. But because Russia is supported by the age of Aquarius energy, and also the energy of period 8 will be carrying over into period 9. And very importantly, period 9 supports period 8. You know, like Earth supports metal and builds it and creates it. Same way fire creates Earth. So mountain Earth and fire of period 9 will be continue creating that mountain Earth. You know, think about the forges of old. The old forge. Remember the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. You know, this ring was forged in the bowels of the mountain. Remember the story of the rings, right? These rings were forged in the bowels of the mountain. That's where forges used to be located. What is a forge? Quintessentially, that's fire that creates something precious, such as metal ring, right? Or gold ring that is the all-powerful ring. So think fire burning inside the mountain and creating these precious either stones or precious metals within it. In other words, your mountain Earth will continue being supported by that fire within the mountain. Okay? Fire burning within the mountain in the forge continues building, building, building. So Russia will continue growing and building throughout period 9. And then come period 1 in 2044. That's a beautiful time for Russia. That's the time of water and the north. And that will be discussed some other time.